Welcome back to Sports4CLE, and we welcome in Buckeyes beat reporter here on cleveland.com, Stephen Means. Stephen, appreciate the time. Buckeyes getting ready for the NCAA tournament. They'll face Oral Roberts. When you watch the Buckeyes in that tournament, what was the difference the way they played, getting to the championship game, lost to Illinois in overtime, as opposed to the struggles they had down the stretch in the regular season?
Yeah, I don't think they did much differently, to be honest with you. They still gave everybody a heart attack every time they came onto the court. They executed maybe a little bit better down the stretch than they did in that Illinois loss. Outside of that Iowa game, though, they were pretty solid. It's just the difference is the ball rolled the right way at the end of the game. And I know that's a very simple way of thinking about it, but that 4-game stretch was really, if you go back and watch those games, it was maybe 1 or 2 possessions at the end of the game that ended up losing them those basketball games. Even if they were blowing double-digit leads along the way, those were still games where outside of the Iowa game, you can argue they probably should have won those basketball games. And so maybe they just tinkered a couple of things here or there in the last 3 to 4 minutes of the game, and they were able to pull out wins.
So they get Oral Roberts and the region, how it's set up. What do you think about that matchup? And what do you think about the way it's set up for the Buckeyes advancing into that tournament a little bit deeper?
I think Ohio State has a Final Four path, which is crazy that I'm saying that after what they were doing 2 weeks ago, but it's also crazy what they just did for the last 4 days here. It starts off with Oral Roberts. I think what scares you there is Max Abmas, leading scorer in the country, 24.4 points per game. That kid's been watching Stephen Curry and Damian Lillard shoot the basketball because he will pull it from anywhere and he will efficiently make shots. He shoots about 43% from three-point range, and Oral Roberts is the team. They're going to get him up. So if they get hot, I don't think they can beat Ohio State, but they can hang with Ohio State for about 35 minutes of that basketball game just because they're making – if they're going to shoot 35 to 43 pointers and they hit 10 to 15 of them, that's enough to keep you in a basketball game. But I do think Ohio State ends up getting to the second round where then things get a little bit more difficult. But I do think there is a clear path to at least the Elite Eight, and I think they can compete with Baylor. Baylor's one of the best teams in the country, but I think Ohio State has one of the better offenses in the country, and when it's clicking, I think there is a pathway to where we're seeing that Big Ten championship game between Illinois. We're seeing a part 4 of the Illinois-Ohio State matchup. Obviously, Illinois right now holds that series lead 2-1, winning in the Big Ten championship game and then winning to close out the regular season.
When you look at the Buckeyes, what are some keys? What are some keys for Ohio State to get as far as quite honestly, they should?
It starts with E.J. Liddell. He shot about 45-46% from the field during the regular season. Obviously, he's their leading scorer and best player. But let's just be honest here. He struggled in the Big Ten tournament. I know he was getting double-digit scoring every game. That's because he's going to get shots. He's the best player on the team. He's going to get shots. But he only shot about 31%. And a lot of that was he was banging with some of the best big men in the country, Luka Garza, Kofi Cockburn, Hunter Dickinson. Well, he didn't have to deal with them again unless they reach the Final Four or a national championship game. They don't have to deal with an elite-level big man for most of this tournament. So maybe that frees up E.J. Liddell to be the 16-point-per-game scorer, the borderline 20-point-per-game scorer that he is, but also be a little bit more efficient in it, not maybe have to force some shots because he's not tired from having to guard some of the best big men in the country while also trying to bang down low with them on the offensive end. So it starts there with him just being more efficient. I think the X factor, though, is probably Musa Jallow. Obviously, we don't know when Kyle Young's going to play again. He's had 2 concussions in 3 weeks. My money's on we probably don't see him again this year just for safety precautions. So a small team just got smaller. But when you have a guy like Musa Jallow who can guard point guards, shooting guards, small forward, power forwards, and even some centers, having that type of defensive versatility from a guy who doesn't necessarily give you anything offensively, but when he gives you that much, that's a big deal when you get into these tournament games where, as I just mentioned with guys like Max Abmas, if you're playing guys like that, if you have a guy on your team who can shut that guy down or at least make it a difficult day for him, that's a big boost for Ohio State. So it starts with those two, and then obviously can Dwayne Washington Jr. continue to wow us all with some of the shot making.
You mentioned Kyle Young, a local guy up here in Northeast Ohio from Jackson High School in Massillon. What do the Buckeyes miss in not having him? That's a guy that's played a lot of basketball for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, he does everything you don't want to do on a basketball court. All the stuff that's not pretty, the gritty stuff. He dives on the floor for loose balls. He guards the Kofi Coburns and the Luka Garzas and the Hunter Dickinsons of the world. He gets rebounds. He's a defensive anchor for you and all of us. And as of lately, he's your best three-point shooter, as he was in the first half of that Michigan game. So he just does a lot of the little things that really don't show up in a box score that you can't replace, that are basically invaluable, and you don't notice it's missing until it's not there. But also, he's one of the two seniors along with CJ Walker, so you're missing that leadership on the court and that lead by example way that he is.
You mentioned Liddell. Who else needs to be a guy that carries the scoring load if the Buckeyes are going to beat a team like a Baylor that can get up and down the floor and score?
Yeah, I think their best three players just have to play like their best three players, starting with Liddell, obviously, but then Dwayne Washington Jr. And the two most impressive games Ohio State has played this year, that loss to Michigan and then the loss to Illinois in the Big Ten championship game, Dwayne Washington Jr. was driving that train. He had 30 points against Michigan the first time, and then he broke Evan Turner's record for most points in a Big Ten championship game with 32 points on Sunday. Can he do that all? Can he continue to do that efficiently? That's been the problem with Dwayne Washington, is that he is the ultimate, no, why are you shooting that? No, why are you shooting that? And then it goes in and you go, good job. Just get back on defense. That's exactly what he is. And so when he's hitting those shots like he did against Michigan, like he did against Illinois, really like he did against Purdue and Minnesota as well, that's once again invaluable stuff, especially when you're talking tournament basketball. It's all about who's got some shot makers who can show up and win you 6 games in a row. Can he continue to do that and not have one of those games where he's 2 of 17, where all of a sudden those shots that are bad shots aren't falling, so now they're hurting your team? But then Justice Sueing continuing to be the versatile offensive player that he is, he can rebound for you. He can get 10 rebounds whenever he needs to. He can help you as a scorer. He averaged 10 points a game this year. He can be the playmaker. He's the starting point guard and basically plays point guard the first 4 minutes of each half before CJ Walker comes in and takes over. So if those 3 guys show up, this is what the tournament's about. Depth gets you through a season, but your great players are going to get you hardware. So if those 3 players are playing well, I like Ohio State's chances of a deep run.
Last thing I'll ask you, how impressive do you think the coaching job that Coach Holtman has done? We mentioned, things could have gone, either way late in the year, but you lose those games and then you hit the tournament time and you start going forward again. There's some talent in coaching that enables you to do that.
I think this team learned a lot about itself over the last 7 games here, Holtman included. I think he made some mistakes on some play calls and put some guys in some positions they didn't belong. He'll say that's just Twitter coaching, but that is what it is. But also he had some moments here where it's clear, okay, I learned from that. When he put CJ Walker in a position against Purdue to shoot a game-winning shot by driving to the hole amongst the trees, that probably wasn't the best decision, which is why CJ Walker ends up losing the ball and we go to overtime. Well, the next time we see that exact same play call, he puts Justice Sueing in that situation, a 6'7", 215-pound guy, and they end up with an and one to take the lead and basically stay into that Illinois game and force overtime in that situation. And so great coaching, but also some learning by both the players and how to be better in some of these clutch situations, but also from Holtman and his coaching staff on who to put in some of these situations to make sure you get the best possible result.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at is Coach learned a lot about his team and figured out how we best use these guys to end up with a win, which is the goal ultimately.
Yeah, look, this was impressive. Whether it gave you a heart attack or not, the fact that they were up 15 points and 12 points and 17 points and whatnot, that's Big Ten basketball at the end of the day, and they pulled out these wins. But to see where this team was literally last Sunday, when they were on a 4-game losing streak and we're wondering, is this team fake good? Are they going to get upset in the first round of the NCAA tournament? And now all of a sudden, we're going into Sunday's game and people in our text description are asking, hey, can this team get a number 1 seed? The complete 180 that this team has taken is kind of immaculate in a way, but also they showed these signs of what their ceilings were earlier in the season, and we also saw what their floor was late. And so now I think they're ready. They're battle tested and ready for March Madness in a way that maybe some of these teams aren't, just because of what they've had to play the last 7 games of the season.
Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. As always, Stephen, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight on the Buckeyes. Thanks for joining Sports4CLE. Appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Thanks for having me.